Thank you so much for coming to the Understanding Municipal Government series put on by the Alaska Literacy Project, the Peer Leader Navigators, Catholic Social Services, and RAISE, and of course the Anchorage Public Library. We are so happy that you took time out of your lovely summer day to come and hear about municipal government and how you can make a difference. I would like to start our evening off with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are facilitating from Digetnu, the current and ancestral homelands of the Dena'ina peoples. Let's take a moment to reflect on this history of this land. What do you know about the history of Indigenous resistance to colonization of the land that we're on? And what's one step that you could take to learn more? If you're joining us from outside of Anchorage, I do encourage you to find out whose ancestral lands you are currently residing on. So with us today, we have Kengo Nagaoka and Brian Conwell. Kengo was born and raised in Fairbanks, Alaska, and now lives in Anchorage. His parents are both from Japan and teach Japanese language in high school. Kengo graduated from the University of Denver in 2018 and worked in Anchorage to encourage young people to vote and get involved in their community. He is a teacher with the Alaska Literacy Program. He enjoys playing music, skiing, and biking. Brian grew up in Alaska, and is currently a rising senior at Harvard University. For the summer, he is working as a Youth Civic Engagement Fellow at the Alaska Center, where he hopes to encourage young people to vote and to get involved in the political process. In his free time, he enjoys hiking, fishing, playing cards, and watching movies. Thank you so much for joining us, Kengo and Brian.
Thank you for having us. Oh, and are you passing it on to us?
I am passing it on to you. Thank you.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you. Nice to meet you. My name is Kengo. Thank you so much for having me here. And I'm really happy to be here with my friend, Brian. Yeah, Brian, do you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm really excited for tonight, so hopefully it goes well.
Yeah, so Naki contacted me and told me that you were wanting to learn more about municipal government and how government works, how you can make a difference. And so we're really happy to be here. Brian and I have done work encouraging young people to get involved in their community, do community organizing, get involved with government too. So we're happy to answer any questions you have. And today we're going to be learning a little bit about the 3 levels of government and how they work together, and also talking a little bit about elections and how that works. And yeah, please, I think our presentation is about 30 minutes, and then we have question and answer after that. But please, if you have any questions during the presentation, ask us. And also, I know there are also a lot of experts in the room here. So, you know, Natki, Lori, Stacia, Lauren, Naboni, anyone here, if you have things to add, please add too. Yeah. Okay. So I will start the presentation now. Can everyone see my screen? Okay.
Yes.
Yep. So today's presentation, some of the goals are learning about what are the 3 levels of government, What does each level do? Who are our representatives on each level of government? We'll also talk about elections. When are elections? How do you participate in elections? And this is really all about giving you tools to advocate for your community. So yeah, how do you know who to go to in order to ask a question about your government or tell them something, that sort of thing. So let me introduce to you the 3 levels of government in the United States. So the first level of government is the local level. And here in Anchorage, I think most of us are in Anchorage today. Here in Anchorage, that's the Municipality of Anchorage. And I think maybe last time you learned a little bit about the local government, is that correct? Yeah. So you might have learned a little bit more about local government. Maybe can someone tell me what you discussed last time? Was anyone at the last session?
Yes, it's about the local and how many members they had the assembly
Hmm.
and the
Okay.
service they offer the muni, the departments and all the stuff about the
Okay.
municipality, about the Anchorage.
Okay, so you're experts already, huh?
Not even close.
Oh yeah, I have a lot to learn too. Yeah. Okay. The second level is the state government. And here, obviously, it's Alaska state government. We'll talk about what they do too. And then last, the third level of government is the federal government. And so that's the US federal government, United States. So the entire nation. Okay. So the first level of government is the local government, right? Municipality of Anchorage that you learned about last time. And so you see here, this is where the assembly meets. The assembly members meet in the library. This is the room that they meet. Some of the things that the Municipality of Anchorage does is public safety, like police and fire department. Also the Anchorage Health Department. They help out with COVID relief. So, you know, the municipality was the one that did the mask mandate in Anchorage. And they also used a lot of money to help out with COVID. They also do the public transportation. So people mover, the bus system. They also do water and waste services. So they're the ones that pick up your trash, picking up your trash. Also, if you own a house, you pay the property tax to the Municipality of Anchorage. They also run the library, the public library, and a lot more. Yeah. Does anyone have anything to add about what does the municipality do? This is just some examples. Mm-hmm.
I see you already covered it. Sorry.
Lori, am I on? Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Hi, Elise.
Hi. Hey there. I would add some of the fun things that the municipality does. Like they bring together events at the park on Denali Park Strip. There's a really wonderful event that happens near where people are farming, raising their own vegetables, and then they get to sell them. That happens in Mountain View, and a lot of that has come together because of wonderful leaders in the municipality, and they've been working with people like students at ALP to find out what they would like to do with regard to things like raising their own food, or if they want to do things that are related to education. That's another, I think, interesting and important part, that they put in a large amount of money into the education, into the schools in Anchorage. So I just wanted to bring that up too, that's a wonderful way that our families are getting served by government.
And then in the chat, snow removal and parks and recreation were mentioned.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. Like, if you have been to the welcoming week activities, yeah, that's something that the Muni does. So a lot of people call it Muni for short. Not, you don't have to say Municipality of Anchorage, you just say Muni. Okay, thanks for adding on. Maybe I'll pass it on to Brian for the next one.
Thanks. Yeah, so on the screen are a couple of the things that the state of Alaska does. And that picture is a picture of the state capitol, I believe, in Juneau. And so, yeah, the first thing, Department of Health and Social Services. So the state of Alaska is more related on like statewide issues. So I guess this kind of maybe could sum up these like 8, in that they deal with interactions between other communities within the state, and also interactions between like the federal government and these municipalities. So yeah, I guess Medicare and Medicaid, so health insurance, making sure that health insurance from the federal level gets allocated to the different people that need it within each state. And then the state troopers. So the state troopers are in charge of enforcing laws outside of the jurisdiction, or where the municipalities are responsible. So for example, if you get pulled over on the highway going between like Anchorage and Fairbanks, for example, that'll be a state trooper, I believe. And then the Department of Motor Vehicles, that's if you were to go get your driver's license, for example, or a license to operate like a long haul truck or something like that, you'd go to the Department of Motor Vehicles and pick that up. Yeah, Alaska Court System and Corrections. And so because there are these law enforcement bodies on the state level, like the state troopers, there's also going to be courts that decide whether or not the law has been enforced fairly, or I guess there are all sorts of really complicated things that you could go into regarding the law and the court system. But the gist of it is that if you get a ticket or something like that and you go to court, that system's going to be taken care of by the state government on most cases. And then the public schools, this is really important, I guess. Each school district is run by local government with a school board, but the money that's taken in by the school district is a combination of money from the municipalities and the state of Alaska, and also a little bit of money from the federal government, so the nationwide government, that comes in the form of like the school lunch program. So if you're getting money from like free and reduced lunch, that's likely federal money. And then there's also state money and municipal money from the municipal government. So for example, in the state of Alaska, there's what's called a base student allocation, which means that for each child in the school system, the state gives a certain amount of money. And that amount of money fluctuates whether or not the student is like special needs or something like that. But essentially, that's money that the state of Alaska is allocating to local school districts. And then the PFD, so the 1,000 or 2,000 or whatever amount check that you'll get from the state every year for being a resident is money that is controlled by the state of Alaska. And when you apply for the PFD, that'll be on the state's website. And then business licenses. So similar, I guess, to the Department of Motor Vehicles. If you're wanting to set up a business in Alaska, that'll be a state group that'll be giving you that business license. And there's a lot more, I think, that other people could add. So if people could chime in, that'd be appreciated as well.
So one of the things that the state government does is they have the state library of the Alaska State Library. The Alaska State Library does a lot. They provide grants that local libraries can apply for to supplement their own funding through their own local governments. But what people don't realize is the state library also pays for a batch of database subscriptions like Learning Express or Tutor.com. So that those databases are available statewide rather than just through local libraries.
Cool. Thank you for that.
I guess one more that I could add is the state ferry system. So for example, my parents, when they first moved to Dutch Harbor, where I'm from, they took the ferry from Homer, Alaska, all the way to Dutch Harbor. And yeah, so if you get on the ferry, that's a state-run system.
Yeah, and I'll add on to Brian's comment. Similarly, the roads are either state money or it's passed through money from the federal government, unless it's a local road. So if the road connects from one town to another, the pot of money that helps to keep that road up and build that road originally typically comes from the state or federal government. And then I think maybe this is touched on a bit, but maybe not, welfare. So if a family is not able to support themselves, if they're not able to work and they receive funds, both either a card to helping with food or other things, that money comes from state and federal funds as well. So I just thought I'd mention that to have an appreciation for that. And there are lots of different ways to talk about safety, and troopers is one, but there are other things, other ways that money is getting spent to make sure that families are safe and that families understand the rules and the laws, so that we can all be living safely. Unemployment is really a good comment, Marisol. There's a state unemployment office in many of the larger cities in Alaska, and that's where you would go if you needed to apply for unemployment. It's also where you go to get help to find a job, and they have some training there, and I'm sure that in your at ALP they help connect you to that, but that is a really important state service. Marisol, I agree.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I think you begin to notice that, the municipality, the state, and the federal government, they also work together a lot, and they do very similar things too. Yeah. So let's move on to the federal government now. So the United States federal government, right, covers all of the states. So not just Alaska, but all 50 states. And some of the things that they do is immigration and citizenship. So, if you want to become a US citizen, or you immigrated from somewhere, or a refugee from somewhere, a lot of time you will go through the federal government to come here. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, you probably heard a lot about it. This is also under the federal government. So Social Security too. So if you are elderly or disabled, or otherwise unable to work, this is the way that the federal government helps you out. The state also does too. And the US federal government also does Medicare and Medicaid. So Medicare and Medicaid is like a state and a federal thing. I think most everyone here probably got the stimulus check a couple months ago. For the COVID, we got one, a couple times. That is also from the US federal government. So everybody in the United States got one. The federal government also does unemployment too. So if you're not able to work or find a job, then you can apply for help through the government. Some of the other things are like the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation, CIA, Central Intelligence Authority. These are all federal government. And also the military is under the federal government as well. So this is just some of the things that the federal government does. It does a lot of things, but this is maybe some of the things that we are all familiar with. And I just want to pause for questions now. Does anyone have questions about the 3 levels of government? And maybe I would like to hear from volunteers or students who are here. Do you have any questions?
I'll throw a question out. Can you just kind of clarify the unemployment, for example? It's money that's decided on some level from the federal, but then you have to apply to the state office, and the state will also have some money that they decide that might be above the federal minimum. Is that correct? Or can you kind of clarify how it's on both those lists?
Good question. There's probably someone here who knows more than I do about that. Yeah. Does someone know about that?
There's a labor department on the state level and on the federal level, and they both have an interest in making sure that folks are working or have access to tools to get to work. And so there are, when you let's see, how do I say? So the state has a program that oftentimes is, again, using federal money as well. And it's kind of a pass-through. So the money comes from the federal government, and then the state uses it to help Alaskans get the support that they need if they are unemployed. And Naki, I'm trying to understand what your question was about different levels. Essentially, if you work already, you do have to pay a small part of your paycheck goes into unemployment. And that is kind of like a protection in case you get, it's sort of like paying a little tax on your paycheck to help you should you become unemployed later. Was that your question?
My question was, different states, I think when COVID happened, different states were giving out a different amount for unemployed. Is that correct? That depending on what state you were in, there was some difference that the state decides how much money you get for unemployment, or I don't know if it affects Medicare benefits as well.
Yeah, very, very true. So the unemployment came out at X amount from the federal government, and then the states, some were supplementing it. In Alaska, it was $300 a month, and they stopped that relatively recently, or it will stop if it hasn't already. And that was determined, you're right, by the state level as to whether or not they were going to supplement or add to what the federal government had already decided for all Americans.
I have a question. Hi, my name is Marisol. For example, when I pay my check, I pay to the state, right? I give the money, they take my money for my paycheck, and the company send the money to the state, not the federal government, right?
No, that goes to the federal government, Marisol.
Okay.
Yeah. The Alaska has no state income tax. If you live in a different state, you may have to pay the state income tax to your your state government. But in Alaska, you don't have to pay that. But you do pay federal income tax on your paycheck.
Do you know why that is? Why we don't have a state?
Well, I think Elise probably has a lot to add on this, but Alaska is one of the only states where we don't have the state income tax. And why that is because when we actually used to have a state income tax, I believe, but it was taken away because we were making so much from oil money. So we were producing a lot of oil, and the government was making a lot of money from the oil revenue, and so they said we don't actually need to tax people's income, to do that. And there have been talks now about doing the state income tax again, because the oil production has been lower and the government has been making less money from oil. But yeah, maybe does not someone have something to add? Yeah. So Alaska is an interesting state because we are unique in a lot of ways.
So there is actually a question from the chat about education and how that works at a federal, state, and local level.
Maybe I could talk about that because, if anyone
Sure.
else, unless anyone else wanted to. Okay. So it's really complicated, I think, but the basics of it is I'd say that the school that, for example, that you'd send your child to is governed by a school board, and there's elections for school board that are municipal, so that people from Anchorage, for example, are elected to the Anchorage school board, and make high level decisions, I guess, on, for example, how much money is budgeted to the operations of all the schools within the school district. But that money comes from not only the municipality, so it's not only, for example, sales taxes in Anchorage that pay for the schools, it's also oil taxes on the state level. that are allocated to the all the different school districts, and there's also money from the federal government that's like maybe like 2 to 5%, I would say, of like a budget of like a school district is federal, because it's really only dealing with like I think like the school lunch program is probably the biggest example.
I'll add to
And
that. Oh, sorry,
yeah.
Brian.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
I
go
would
for it.
add one thing that might be of interest to you all is that the food is one piece that the federal government supplies for schools. The other piece is there are monies, Title I, Title VII, Title VIII. There are different title monies that are federal dollars to even the field, so to speak, to make sure that every child is getting a good quality education. So if a child needs English as a second language, for example, or if a child, his family is getting most of their food from fishing, they get a special allocation to help make sure that we're making it fair and even for all students. That's the idea anyway. So there are federal money dollars that are spent in other ways to help ensure that every child is getting a fair shot at getting all the tools they need and the education that they need to get to be a self-sufficient adult.
Yeah. And I just thought of another thing that the federal government is involved in. And if you've heard of like No Child Left Behind, which was a federal piece of legislation, it made it so school districts had to institute standardized testing. So that's like one thing that, and it did a lot of other things, but that's like one example, I guess, of the way that the federal government also can impact things in the schools. But yeah, the bulk of the money comes about half from the state, half from municipal governments, depending on how much the municipal government decides to give to the school district. And also, I guess, depending on how much the state decides to give to the school district, depending on how much money they're taking in.
This also applies, so there's also a certain amount of standards that local institutions have to meet before they're able to get state or federal money. For instance, Anchorage Public Library, one of the things that we have to do, our director has to be qualified. They have to have a master's of library science to hold the position. If the mayor were to appoint someone who doesn't have an MLS, then we would lose state funding. And that's going to be the same with schools. If they are not meeting certain standards, then they can lose money from free lunch programs, from the supporting students with disabilities, and other federally funded programs.
Thank you everyone for chiming in. Yeah, I'd like to move us to the next one, next section, so we have enough time to go through this whole presentation. I'm gonna first go, so we're going to continue to talk about elected officials. So these are people that we vote for to represent us in the government. And let's go back to this, the 3 levels of government. We have elected officials at each level to represent us. And we will go over who those people are and yeah, who your representative is. Yeah, let's continue here. So for the Municipality of Anchorage here, the local government, we vote for a mayor and we vote for the Anchorage Assembly. So assembly is like the group of people who is called the elected body of people in the local government. So how many people here voted in the last Anchorage election in April? Did you vote in the Anchorage election?
Yes.
Yes. And so the result from that was we have a new mayor, Mayor Dave Bronson. Yep. And I'm not sure if we changed any assembly members. Yeah. But let me show you the map. First, the Anchorage Assembly, they do a lot of work to, for instance, make the municipal budget. And so like this money that we get from taxes and from the federal government or the state government, the Anchorage Assembly decides where does that money go. And they also, do local ordinances, so local laws and things like that. Those are the folks that did a lot of the local ordinances around COVID safety here. And depending on where you live in Anchorage, you have a different assembly member to represent you. Okay. So if you live downtown, this is called Assembly District 1. And then we have Assembly District all the way from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 districts here. And so depending on where you live in Anchorage, you have a different assembly member. But everyone in Anchorage has the same mayor. And so you see this little icon here? This is a home base for ALP. ALP office, right, is in East Anchorage on Burgaw Street. And so that means, if you look on the map, that means that ALP is in District 5. So who are ALP's assembly members? Let's see. So assembly members for District 5 are Forrest Dunbar and Pete Peterson. And so if you are able to vote and you vote in the Anchorage elections, you will probably see these people's names on your ballot, and you can vote for them or vote for someone else. And I will pass it on to Brian to talk about the state government.
Yeah, so we have the governor of Alaska, who is currently Mike Dunleavy. And then we have our state house of representatives, and we also have this. And so the governor of Alaska is the executive of the state. And so I guess a similar role as the mayor of a city or the president of the United States. And so the governor of Alaska has the power to, for example, veto bills that the state legislature passes. And so, and so there's also the state legislature composed of the House of Representatives, which has 40 members, and then the state Senate, which has 20 members. And when each of both the House of Representatives and the state Senate both agree to both separately pass a bill and agree to reconcile it, so make it about the same, like, get the similar parts of each bill and put them together into one bill that both bodies can agree on. It's sent to the governor, who can say yes or no, we want to pass this, and then once that is signed by the governor, then it becomes law. And so the state government deals with all the different things that we've talked about. So the PFD, how much money to give to the schools, state troopers, yada, yada, yada. So all those different things. And this is a blown up map of Alaska with all the different state House and Senate districts. And so Alaska is really big. And so each House district and Senate district is going to be really big as well. And as you can see, so the way that this is organized is the state House districts are given a number 1 through 40. And so you can see these really big districts, like where I'm from State House District number 37, and then Senate District S. So yeah, it's really big because not that many people live there. And so they try to balance each district according to geography and also try to get equal, I guess, number of population in each district. And there's also state senators. So the senators represent districts that are composed of 2 House districts. So as you can see, for example, the State House District 39 and 40, which are the 2 ones up north, are both Senate District T. And so the same senator represents that area. And so all the different towns and villages in this big district vote on that senator. And then it's different for the other state Senate districts. And then in Anchorage, it's going to be really small, but there's quite a few small state House districts there, and Fairbanks as well. Yeah. So here is an example. So it's the same concept as was previously. So that house is located in House District 19, and then Senate District J. And so as you can see with this graphic, yeah, there's going to be 1 senator that represents this area that composed of 2 House districts, and then 1 representative that represents these even smaller districts of Anchorage. So yeah, if you're living in that house, your representative is Rep. Guarantar, and then your senator is Tom Begich.
Yeah, so this here is where the ALP office is again. It also includes Airport Heights and Mountain View. And so if you live in this area, your representative is Guarantar and your senator is Tom Begich. And depending on where you live, you will have a different representative and a senator. And these are the people who go down to Juneau, which is Alaska's state capital, and they make laws for all of Alaska. Okay, we will come back to this too. So let's move on to the last level, which is the federal government, right? And the elected officials at this level are the president, who is now Joe Biden. We had our last election was November, and so we have a new president, Joe Biden. We also vote on our legislators, and so we have U.S. House representatives and senators too. You may also have heard people call us Congress people. So people are like, hey, you need to call your legislator. You need to call your congressperson. These are the people they're talking about. And for US senators and House representatives, each state has 2 senators. Every state has 2 senators. But each state has a different number of House representatives. So Alaska, for instance, we have 2 senators and 1 House representative. And you see here, these are our current senators and House representatives. We have Senator Lisa Murkowski, we have Senator Dan Sullivan, and we have Representative Don Young. And these are the people who go to Washington, D.C., right, to make laws for all of the United States. And everybody in Alaska, no matter where you live in Alaska, these are your representatives. Yeah. And let me go back one. So Alaska only has one House representative, right? But California, for instance, I think has like 34 representatives, or something like that, because California has a lot more people than Alaska, right? Yeah. So depending on where you live, yeah, you're going to have different senators and House representatives. So one thing I want to mention too is that, let's see. Okay, I think I'm going to move on to the Q&A. So do folks have questions on what we just learned about elected officials? Any questions? Or anything you'd like to add?
I would like to add just one thing if I could, that I hope that this is reassuring to know that there are so many people working for us. We have someone in our neighborhood, that would be the assembly person, or people, there's two. We have our local mayor. We have, each of us has a representative, and each of us has a state representative and a state senator. And then similarly, we also all share the very same US representative and US senator. So all these different levels, every level has somebody, two senators actually for Alaska and for every state. So everyone has quite a few different levels depending on what sort of need you have. And I think that must be something we're going to talk about next. You'll know where to go. And that's, I think, really wonderful to be able to think through that. And they all have staff who are ready to listen to you and hear your concerns. And it's a really nice way of being organized. I appreciate you helping us to see all of this visually.
Yeah, thank you, Elise.
How often do we vote on each?
Yes, Lori, we are going to be getting into that in the next section. Yeah. Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Elise. And I just want to maybe go back here. Do you remember where we learned about what each of these government does? So, for instance, if you have a question maybe about what is the Municipality of Anchorage doing in the health department, you can contact your assembly member to ask, and they or their staff will help you figure this out. Also, if you have some sort of issue, with the local government, you can contact your assembly member that way. Same thing with the state. Say you're having a lot of trouble, or you run into some sort of problem trying to get your license or something. Maybe if you contact your representative, they might be able to help you out and find out what to do. Yeah. Or the federal government too. For instance, my parents, they're from Japan. They immigrated here from Japan, and recently they had an issue with their green card because they were not getting their stimulus checks because they had a green card and they're not citizens. So they actually, emailed Senator Lisa Murkowski, and her staff helped my parents out to get the stimulus check. Yeah. So, if they're able to help you out there, they can be very helpful. Okay. So I know that we are getting late into the into the hour. So let's move on to talk more about the elections. And I think that you will be talking more about elections later. So this will just be an introduction to how this works. So every person that we just talked about is elected. And so every couple of years, we will be voting in order to keep them in office or to maybe get someone new into office. And depending on the position, we will vote on them at different times, right? So in the local level for the mayor and assembly, every mayor and assembly person is in their position for 3 years. So every 3 years we will vote on them, but we have we have the local election every year. So the last election was just this April, a couple months ago. Next election will be next April. For the state, the governor is in there for 4 years, House representative is in there for 2 years, and then senator is in there for 4 years. And we vote every 2 years for the state. So the last election was November 2020, last year. And then so the next state election will be November 2022, next year. Same thing for federal elections. We have federal elections every 2 years. And so the president is in there for 4 years, House representative for 2 years, senator for 6 years. And our next election will be next year in November. In order to vote, in order to register to vote, you must be one, a United States citizen. You also must be an Alaska resident. You have to be at least 18 years old. You cannot be a convicted felon, meaning you've been to prison for a felony, unless your voting rights have been restored. And you also cannot be registered to vote in another state. Yeah. If you would like to vote, but you have maybe English is not your first language, you speak another language, you can get assistance to vote. Some polling places have different language ballots. There is also language assistance on the election website. And let me show you. Elections website. For instance, this is the Spanish language site on the Alaska Division of Elections. They also have a lot of different languages, a lot of native languages too. You can also bring your translator into your polling place to vote. So maybe you cannot read English very well, but your daughter does. You bring your daughter to vote with you, and you can vote that way. Does that make sense?
I also want to point out that whenever dealing with the municipality, we do have a language access plan that does include translation and interpretation services for anyone who needs it.
Yeah, do people have questions about voting? Any questions? Okay.
Hi, my name is Abiba. I have a question about voting.
Yes.
Most of the time I hear from my community, people is easy way can go vote, but the problem is they don't know how to study or read the story and then behind the voter, like they don't know like the person, how
Yeah.
they don't have any idea the person to vote, you know, not just only the translation help them the day of election or voting, but they don't know who is the person to vote because they don't know how to read the, you know, the background, the history, whatever. Do you guys, how many different language do you guys have?
Stacia, do you know the answer to that? How many different languages?
For the Language Access Center,
Yeah, at the municipality.
so generally when I'm translating documents, so in the slideshow you saw the flyers for the COVID vaccine clinics. The big five for the municipality are going to be Hmong, Hmong Korean, Spanish, Samoan, and Tagalog.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the languages that we will most often have our big important documents translated into. However, we also have an interpretation center where all you have to do is point to the language. So we can set up three-way phone calls between, or we can get an interpreter on the phone line. And that is more than 90 languages.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If it's in-person interpretation is needed, then we have to contract with someone and we'll need a little bit more notice, but the phone line is always open.
Yeah. And I understand your questions, Abiba, because even if you know how to vote, you're a citizen, you know where to go. Like if you don't know the people on the ballot, you know, you don't know who to vote for, right? Like who are all these people on the ballot? And so there's a different couple ways to get to know. There are many websites that you can go to figure out, you know, who can I vote for mayor, or who is this person. I think ALP is a great resource too. You know, people like Naki know a lot about this kind of stuff. I think also the Alaska Center, where Brian works, they do a lot of like voter trainings, and sort of educational materials so that you can get to know who's on your ballot. And you can, I also wanted to show you, you can also like look online for your sample ballot. And maybe in some other lesson we can do that too. But like you can look at what does your ballot actually look like before you go to vote. So this one was from last November. Yeah, so you can look at what it looks like, and then you can also see from last April, the municipal election here. But yeah, when I first voted, I didn't know what I was doing. You know, when I was 18 and I started to vote, yeah, it was difficult for me to find the information too. So, but there are a lot of people around us that can help out. Okay, well. Maybe do we have like one more question? I think we're going to maybe try to close up this section after one question. Any more questions? Okay. So let's let's keep talking about this, and I'm happy to be your resource too. So if you have any questions about voting, just let me know. You can call me or text me, and I can help you out. Yeah. And thank you so much for having us. I think I want to pass it on to maybe Stacy or Elise to go next. But thank you, Brian, for also joining me to help out with this too.
All right, thanks, Kengo and Brian. I do want to point out part of what the Anchorage Public Library is there for is to bridge people to the information that they need. If there is enough interest and if we have some partners to work with, doing informational sessions about what's on the ballot is absolutely possible and and something that we can do. We just need to know that people are interested and will show up. So now we're going to introduce our next speaker, Elise Galvin. Elise is a third-generation Alaskan and a proud mom of 4. She worked to expand early childhood education for Alaskan kids at the public-private partnership Best Beginnings, and she went on to serve Alaskans under the leadership of 2 governors to improve the state's public schools. She served Alaska under Republican and independent governors and led a nonpartisan grassroots movement to restore education funding and improve our schools. So I'm now going to turn this over to Elise.
Thanks very much. I appreciate that. And I'm thrilled to be here to talk about federal and state money and kind of how they interact with each other, so that you might understand how it is that you got that stimulus check, for example, so that you might appreciate that those folks who you vote for really do make policy that does make a difference in terms of your life. Whether it's a federal law that says we're all going to wear seatbelts so that we can have fewer fatalities on the road, or maybe it's something around making sure that every child gets fed lunch. There are lots of different needs that our society has to be a strong nation, and so I'm going to help guide us through and understand a little bit about the volume of money that is spent and how it is spent and how it gets to Alaska and then ultimately to the municipality is what I was asked to talk about. And I'm happy to share to answer anything else that I might know. I can tell you I'm not an expert, but I have been involved in some of these things because I followed many of the laws and kind of kept track of how money was getting spent on different levels. So let's start with the federal government spending, and I believe we may have sent a pie chart out to NACI. This just gives you a sense of the funds that are spent. What you don't have, though I don't believe, is how much money was spent, for example, last year in all. And I will tell you that it was, it looks like in the number was in the 21 trillion or so. Is that right? I have my husband next to me. He's going to give us that number in a minute. But what's important to know is that the federal government awards hundreds of billions of dollars in grants to state and local governments each year. The total amount last year was 6.5 trillion, to give you a sense of that. And where they get their money is from people who pay taxes, businesses who pay taxes, and also there are things like fines and fees. And so that money goes into this federal government, and then the federal government, which is comprised of, you've heard already the 3 different levels, right? There's the court system, there's the executive, the president, and then there's Congress, which is our for us, it would be our 2 senators and our 1 House of Representative. And so they get together and they decide what is it that's going to make our people strong and our nation strong as a whole. And so you can see that a lot of money is spent in Social Security so that our elders are taken care of, and in healthcare, that's a big chunk of money, and also defense, our military. And then there are many other ways here you can see that money is spent. Housing, education, and lots of other things. Food and agriculture is a big deal. So there are programs then, because of the federal money that's put together, what they do is they pass a law that is trying to accomplish something. Either it's to solve a problem or to build strength in an area. So let's say they've passed a law around agriculture. They're trying to help small farming communities have enough resources to be able to grow their own. And so what they'll do is they'll have a program, it's a grant program typically, and then money will go out to the different states where that applies. And then folks will apply to the money trying to say, look, I'm one who will benefit from that program. And so they have to fill out forms, and it's a little bit complicated, but if they meet it, then they will get that federal grant money, and they're able to put that together as a way they can serve their community. And so in Anchorage, for example, they've done that, and even ALP. ALP cobbles together money from the federal government and from the state government in order to serve an important section of our community where we know there is a need for further language development, et cetera. So what happens is the different nonprofits and other entities, sometimes they're for-profit, they will be paying attention to the federal programs, or sometimes they will call their representative and ask them to put something in that reflects what is needed in the community by their constituents, by the people who voted them in, or who they're serving, they're representing. And then that representative will pass a bill that will work with others in the government to get that bill passed, that law passed, that will help to serve the communities. Now, this is typically done in chorus or together with the federal and the state and the local leaders. Oftentimes they'll come together and say, we need to have something fixed, and so how can we cobble together, bring together money from the different levels in order to make that happen, to solve that problem. So public safety is a really good example. Oftentimes we think of, oh, state troopers, that's just state money, but that's not always true. The equipment, for example, comes very often from federal money. Trainings oftentimes are put together because there's a bill that's been passed to strengthen our community and make sure that we are effective. And so what they'll do is they'll put together money from the federal government and from the state, and then they'll make sure that the state troopers are strong, for example. That's just an example. And I'm happy to take any questions on that. Naki, do you have another slide there? This slide gives you a better sense of the state spending. So you saw the federal one already. The state spending where you is a big difference is there's not military on here. There's there's some on protection, but it's not at all anywhere near the amount of money that's spent on military. The state focus is mostly the biggest chunks of money are spent on healthcare and education. And again, that always correlates to what we know that the communities need. We have a state constitution that our representatives and our senators and our governor are sworn to try to uphold. And in our Constitution, this is, I don't know how much you've already talked about constitutions, but in our state constitution, which is a document that was put together when our state became a state. So leaders came together and said, what do we want for our state? What do we want for our people? What's fair? And in that constitution in for Alaska, it's very clear that we are going to educate every child, for example. And so with that in mind, our representatives are spending quite a lot of money to ensure that that happens. And then how it gets spent is more local. So your school board members who you vote in, they help to decide how the money is getting spent. In terms of healthcare, a lot of those dollars are really for folks who are on Medicare and Medicaid. So they'll put together federal money and state money and make sure every person is cared for and in a humane way. And that's, again, part of our Constitution, and it's something that we've done since statehood up here in Alaska. There's also been other agreements for Alaska Natives to ensure that they are treated in a way that is fair and equitable. And so there are separate laws that were written on top of our Constitution that are important as well. And I think it's important to acknowledge that. And so federal money also goes in for healthcare and for transportation and for education with regard to Alaska Native community. Let's see, are there any questions so far? I just have one more slide. Okay, so what I'll end with is just kind of giving an overview so that you can imagine in your head what this money is, where it came from, and where it's going. So on the local level, primarily it's property taxes, but there's also tourists in Anchorage. There is a tourist tax, a hotel bed tax, for example, and a few other ways that the municipality gains the local money, but primarily it is property taxes. From the state, they put money to the municipality, so they are what we call a pass-through. So they get money from the federal government and then the state money as well, and they pass it to the municipality and to the school system. So that's for education, for transportation, and for general municipal assistance. From the federal government through the state, they may add, the state could add restrictions to that money, how it's to be spent in order to make sure sometimes that there's accountability, that the money is really solving the problem that was intended. Sometimes it's unrestricted money, which means there's more flexibility in the programming so that if you wanted to solve a problem creatively, you can. And so oftentimes people will ask, oh, is that restricted or unrestricted? And that's why they ask that question, because if it's restricted, it means that there's just a lot more complications and rules around how to spend it. I guess what's perhaps the easiest for us to appreciate is that when you have a question about something, start local. So you could start with your assembly person if anything, somebody asked me recently, what about the fencing around the bridge that crosses over Northern Lights? I'm really worried about it because I see people there and sometimes I wonder if they're suicidal. I said, wow, that's a really thoughtful concern of yours. And I went and I got that person's assembly phone number right away so that they could call. And there's been work on it, and I've heard that that fence got built. So it really does matter if you have a concern or if you have a particular need just for yourself and you want to know how you can solve that problem. Start local. So I would start with your assembly, and if they can't solve it, they will tell you whether or not your state rep or your US congressperson would be the right one to solve it. So I do recommend that you, if you could tap into the earlier slide and find out who your assembly person is, to start local. That will help you understand, because they know where the funding came from, for example, typically to benefit you. And so they will know then how you can ask for support to fix that, any of those problems. Is there any other question about the municipality and where it's getting its money from? I guess a good example also that I should share, since it's so relevant, is the CARES Act money. So when COVID came into play, and this was now a little over a year ago, COVID, we knew that we needed to all pull together quickly, and the federal government worked very quickly to pull together some money because they knew that businesses were shutting down. And so that meant that a lot of people were going to be out of work fast. And if they got out of work fast, they could have jumped into Medicare, Medicaid, all kinds of different things that they might have done in order to protect their families. And they knew that they needed food money. They knew that we needed to do things differently in order to keep us safe. We knew that many businesses needed protections so that they would stay open. Schools decided to shut, but they needed supplies too to keep families able to get Wi-Fi and computers and things like that. So what happened was the federal government came together and they passed a bill very quickly to put funds into the dollars of local, not only the local businesses, but also the municipality, so that it could then divvy up money. You probably are familiar with 211, which is United Way. I know ALP helped a lot with directing people to the resources that they could get quickly to get help with rent, to get help with food, and to make sure that they could still get gas money. All of those things were a real problem for so many Americans and Alaskans. And so they passed something called the CARES Act. And that money then filtered down through the state and to the muni, and eventually went to people. Was it fast enough? A lot of people wonder about that, right? We always wish we could do better, but they did do it as quickly as they could. And they also sent out stimulus checks as quickly as they could in order to keep families fed, basically. And it's important, I think, to understand that there are many levels of people working in order to get that money out. There was a question about the dividend. The dividend is a state-run program. It comes from money from the permanent fund, which is a fund that the state has that collects it used to be oil and gas money, but now because they have invested in many, many things, that the permanent fund gets money every year that is a profit from its investments. And so they take a portion of that profit and they divvy it up among all Alaskans so that everybody could share in that. And there's going to be a lot of questions going on. You'll hear about it in the upcoming few months, because even this week, people are trying to decide, do we have a bigger dividend check, which will be taking away money from that PFD, that fund, or do we have a smaller check this year in order to pay our bills because the oil and gas prices are lower, and so they have less income than they've had in the past, and typically they take a percentage of the income from our fund, and so there's now some worry that we'll be dipping into the fund itself, and the fund was set up years ago as sort of permanent. It's called the permanent fixture for us, and so that's just discussion you'll be hearing about, and it's complicated, to be honest. And of course, Alaskan families could use the money, and they're trying to make decisions that are reasonable, that will keep our state running and not in debt, which would cause all kinds of problems with, it's like I said, it's complicated, but we have a rating system in terms of how banks rate our state and how strong our state is. And so they're trying to make decisions to make sure we don't go too far in debt. But that's what the PFD is. Again, it's a state program. And was there any other comment? Yes, the CARES money really helped a lot with those hot spots for many families. I forget how many thousands got spent. I know that you couldn't buy them anymore because nationally and internationally there was a need so much for families who were having to learn from home. But it was a really important expenditure that, again, the money came primarily from the federal government, but this municipality or the MOA or Muni also acted as a pass-through, and they put in money as well. They certainly helped small businesses too, because we needed to keep as many businesses open as possible because it's so expensive to bring them back to life if they completely shut down. And so it was a lot of work to make sure that our state can come back now that we all have opportunity for vaccines and such. So that's all I have for the federal and the state spending. And if you have any further questions down the line, I'll go ahead and put my phone number in here, and I'm happy to help you navigate the political world. It's confusing, and I think it's very helpful to know how to find resources, and I'd love to help you become engaged.
All right, so I want to thank Brian, Kengo, and Elise for speaking with us tonight. I have learned quite a bit. Next week, we are going to be talking about the Anchorage Assembly and what they do, the difference between the Assembly and the Mayor. And Senator Elvie Gray Jackson will share her experiences about being on the Assembly. So that should be pretty exciting. Thank you. You should definitely come by the Grow North Farm in Mountain View to learn about how to get involved in your local community. There will be a civics fair on Monday, July 26th from 4 to 7 p.m. I know I'm going to be there. You'll be able to learn about important resources provided by the Municipality of Anchorage, meet local elected officials, find ways to get involved in local organizations, and it's a farmer's market, so buy some locally grown vegetables from a farm stand. I know I'm especially looking forward to tomatoes. We could not do this without our peer leader navigators. If you need help finding any information or applying for assistance, you can call or text them, email them, or fill out the form, and the links and information is on the slide right there. All right, and of course, I want to thank again everybody who helped make this series possible. The Alaska Literacy Program, especially Naki, who put all of this together, our peer leader navigators, Catholic Social Services and RAISE, and the Anchorage Public Library. I look forward to seeing you all next week.